Good afternoon, traders. It is Sunday, the 17th of July. I'm recording this for the week commencing Monday, the 18th of July. So just having a look at the major fundamental news or economic news calendar. And I'm really going to, again, just obviously everything being focused around inflation. I'm going to be keeping an eye on an ear out for inflation-related news. And so that means that this Wednesday, for example, there's inflation rate year on year for both Canada and GBP. For it will impact GBP. Also having a look, I'm curious to see what happens with the US home sales. And then, of course, any central bank interest rate decisions, which is both Bank of Japan and European Central Bank this Thursday coming. And finally, on Friday, just curious to see what's going on with the inflation rate year on year and retail sales out of the UK. So those are really going to be where I'm looking to see if there's any alarming changes because now, we kind of know what's going on with the US. We need to see what's happening everywhere else. Okay, that being said, let's move across and have a look at what's going on in the rest of the charts. I think before I proceed, I should also just, keep in mind that I want to keep these under 30 minutes. So I'm going to try and keep going at a specific pace. So first of all, having a look at the dollar index here, we did actually breach. We fell right through that, or cut right through that level, I should say. We had a strong rejection off that 109 level. We've started a potential correction here, so this looks as though we have a retracement in line with, or potentially coming down to say 107 at the very least, possibly as far as 105. Okay, it depends on how overextended the market is. Depends whether we're going to see these fears of the dollar stronger, general inflationary fears that have been driving the stronger dollar to see whether it has become overextended enough, and we're going to see a bit of dollar selling. So we'll see how that goes this coming week, but that should, we've got signs of that. The question is, are we going to get a little bit or are we going to get a lot? Now, also we can see here on the weekly, it's becoming overextended. It's also going a little bit parabolic. So you can just see here the angle is starting to shift. Certainly on the monthly, it's overextended. The question really is, are we going to keep going or are we going to see a bit of a change? Then moving across and having a look at the euro against the US dollar. Again, we started a bit of a swing low process here. Nice rejection candle, bullish candle closing near the highs. We are starting to also something again that downtrend is starting to accelerate a little bit at that point. But here on the 4 hour, we can see we've got bullish momentum. We could see the MACD started to climb. We could see prices now starting to test the upper highs there around 1.01. And so I'd like to see us break through that and just start to work our way back up to 1.02 or possibly even as far as 1.03, maybe even as far as 1.05. We will have to see how that goes. Let's see, we're just past halfway through the month, so it'll be interesting to see where the month ultimately closes. But I would say, we have breached this week. We did breach that parity level. And so in theory, we have that potential to keep going. We'll see whether the market wants to reject it. A little bit further, having a look here at cable. Again, I put in the sort of bearish line here to get a sense of line in the sand to see whether the market, whether the cable starts to break above that. So interesting to see, starting to show a lot of wicks along the bottom here, slowing down. That weekly, though, still looking nice and bearish. That monthly also quite near the lows. And again, that 4 hours starting to look more and more bullish here. So all of this indicating that it's not unreasonable to think we'll get a bit of a climb in the early part of the week, but possibly then resume the longer trend after that. We'll have to see how we close by the end of the week. So here again, also Aussie dollar against the US dollar, definitely now looking more and more bullish, pushing back and then starting to do fewer lows and starting to produce more and more bullish candles on the weekly as well, starting to push a little bit higher. And again, on that 4 hourly, we've got bullish divergence. So we've got that as well. Kiwi dollar is going to be very similar. Kiwi dollar is starting to push and trying to shift into an uptrend. We can see that weekly chart starting to produce those wicks and rejection candles. All of this indicating that the market is intending to push back a little bit. Okay, and so that's on all of those majors. Let's have a look at the dollar yen. So dollar yen as well pushing. We've still got a little bit of lower. The MACD here is still lower, even though we have fresh highs. We could see there's a strong level of resistance at 139. And so there is the possibility again here if we get that weaker dollar. Remember, the dollar yen is doing its own thing anyway, but it's also very much overextended. It's just done such an insane move historically. The last time we had a move this big was kicked off in October 2012 and ran on to approximately June, 2016? 2015? And so that's also just indicating that it is very much on its own mission, but we could see a bit of a deeper correction this week. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Dollar Swissy as well, also starting to reject almost very early, sort of on the tail end of last week, does not appear to want to go any higher. We can see the weekly producing these strong rejections. We've now got a gravestone doji as a series of lower highs. So this could be intending as well to push a little bit low this week. And that monthly, you can see it's really not happy with going much further. Dollar CAD. Dollar CAD also coming down, closing near these old highs here. However, I would say that that did succeed in breaking, and therefore the potential for it to carry on upwards is not that bad. Even is a possibility. We can see here on the daily. Although we've sort of got a slightly lower high here and it is failing a little bit, it did manage to get above that 1.3039 levels. The question is, can it keep going? It certainly is. Although it is failing along the way, it does seem to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Quickly having a look at the Russian ruble, staying in this area for now, near these old highs, so it's still pretty strong and doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. We've got EURUSD. So EURUSD broke through parity there as well. I think that's significant. Nobody really spoke about that as much. We've also got bullish divergence here on the 4 hours. So all of that is looking as though that wants to push a little bit higher. Possibly it wants to come back up and test parity from the other side and then continue down. Okay, because we've moved far enough below that, that might well be the case. Overall, that downtrend relatively intact, but I would say here on the weekly, just looking at it here, we've got possibility of some bullish divergence creeping in here. Therefore, there could be a rejection and a push a little bit higher. Just interesting to see that move. Okay, moving on to metals, commodities, metals, and gold. Gold is still in a downtrend. It's coming down towards 1 point. I've got it here, let's call it 1.675, which is a major level. At this point in time, not really seeing a lot that would ultimately stop it from continuing down to that level. It's still relatively weak. We've got that bearish momentum on the daily. All of this, there is some bullish divergence on the 4 hours. So yes, that weaker dollar could play into that a bit. But overall, the trend here looks not necessarily as overextended. Looks a little bit more happy to continue down. So I'm not going to switch to bullishness on gold just yet. Silver as well, attempting to find some support where it is at $18, and so possibly that may be enough grounds for it to continue to push back up a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, overall everything here leans more bearish than bullish, not including any possible retracements. Okay, copper very heavily bearish. Wicks coming in here, bearish and overextended on the weekly. And also sort of flattening out here on that, may even continue from where it is here at resistance. And actually from a monthly perspective, it's just back into those old highs. So all of this, again, also looking more bearish than bullish, notwithstanding any temporary US dollar weakness. Natural gas attempting to push back up. You can see here from the monthly, this is looking interesting to me. We've got the 50, 20, and 10 in a bullish formation. We've got price coming back into the old highs and producing a monthly bullish candle, which usually, especially if we finish near the highs, would imply that if we break through the highs of that in August, we're going to work our way back up to these old highs where these strong rejections are. So interesting there, almost as though it's prepping to hit higher. Let's have a look at crudes. So crudes here coming, sort of haven't broken the most recent significant low on the weekly. They're still on a downtrend here. My expectation is to see them head up a little bit into the moving averages and possibly actually to continue to the downside. If in the longer run it's going to maintain its bullishness, it might be trying to turn around that $85 mark. And as I was saying last week, my expectation was for it to continue to correct lower. However, if it can stay where it is, we might find the moving averages pulling up to meet it, and then it can continue up from there. So this one's going to be a little bit wishy-washy. It has a downtrend in place. It could continue down. At the same time, if in the longer run it's going to maintain its bullishness, it might want to try and turn around where it is now. So if I'm going to be trading it to the downside on bearish signals, I'm going to be a bit more cautious with my risk, and also wouldn't be surprised if we possibly finish a little bit to the upside next week, but that's not a strong possibility. It's just that it is something that could, of course, it is a possibility though. So just looking at these last couple of days performance on Brent crude as well, and maintaining higher lows here on that weekly and potentially on the monthly. Still a correction down again on Brent down towards 1885. Still looks like that would be a nice natural deep correction at that point. Sugar, meanwhile, is starting to definitely produce a higher low and a strong bullish candle. So the biggest battle for it is this level of resistance up here. Can it get through that? But it looks like it's going to take another run at that level. Coffee, in the meantime, coffee, there we go. Much stronger rejection. I spoke about how strong this resistance was last week and how bullish this candle was. Ultimately, it seems to have now given back. And I think it is worth mentioning that so far it is the price is actually acting below, or is hanging around below at this old level here, round number as well, below the low of this bullish candle. So, okay, therefore, for me, this makes more sense that this is either going to attempt to turn around where it is or continue down, but not necessarily recover. It's a nice strong sort of bearish momentum candle. Wheat as well, wheat having looking how it gapped up and then closed, it's a bearish engulfing candle. Usually in these cases, that is a continuation setup, and therefore it's not unreasonable to think that this is going to continue to head lower. This is a relatively big number here, and therefore it might want to head down towards 740. So interesting having a look at some of these commodities here. We're seeing a lot of commodities shed weight. Cotton here as well, you can see continuing down, putting the brakes on. We've got those wicks coming, but it just keeps closing lower and lower and lower. That is quite a strong bullish candle. There's no bullish divergence here, but usually when I see a series of a big move down becomes smaller and smaller moves, more bullish candles coming in, then I start to expect it to push back up. But that was something similar. I was seeing that in bonds as well, and that ultimately just continued to slide down. So at this point, I really want to see us only break above these highs before I start to lean more bullish on this. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to expect it to either go sideways or head lower, but maintain a generally bearish stance. Okay, looking at the global indices. So they had a relatively strong finish on Friday. We've got that bullish divergence. Well, actually, I lie. I'm sorry. I apologize. We've got higher lows here. We've got that upward trending MACD. So actually, that is very much in line with what price is doing, and therefore is convergent. But you can see the weekly candles here producing these wicks and shadows, trying to move a little bit high. We still have that bullish inside candle on the monthly. All of those indicating a possibility for the market to move higher. So it's going to be very interesting to me as to where we finish at the end of the month, and especially if we close near the high, if we get these bullish candles with very small wicks at the top, it could be a good indication of a move higher in August. You know, if you follow, say, Ray Dalio, or you follow Michael Burry from The Big Short, which was played by Christian Bale, his character, you know, they're all relatively convinced. They have a good track record of being relatively reliable with their judgments, and they're convinced that we're only really halfway through that big market correction. What I'm saying here is that if we are going to recover, if we have let's call this a best case scenario, and there's a worst case scenario. If it is going to be the best case scenario, we're in the right location for price to recover from here. If, however, it does turn out that we're only halfway through and we're going to see a ripple effect as a result of you know, inflation triggering a few other things, or at least higher interest rates, rate hikes, and sort of stagflationary kind of environments starting to occur, or you know, European recessions and other things starting to be triggered, yes, then it is possible we could see the market do another leg down. But at this point in time, if we are going to recover, this is the earliest point at which I would expect it to do that. So I'm looking to see if we do get that strong monthly finish. Here, for example, yeah, we kind of closed again near the highs. So my 4 hourly is going to be interesting. I want to see if we can break above these recent highs here. That will start then to attract obviously more buyers, and the market will then pick up momentum. Nasdaq as well. This is worthwhile mentioning. Look at this. We've got a series of high lows coming into that 12,100 level, 12,150 level. That is in isolation a bullish formation. We've also got bullish divergence on the MACD, and we have an upward trending MACD. All of those are very strong bullish signals, which for me means worthwhile watching here to see if we get a breakout, which means we would then likely head up towards 12,900, 13,000. And so that is absolutely worthwhile watching here. Okay, that would be a great way to finish off next week. Looking at the mini Russell 2000, same thing again. We've got all these wicks. We need to break free of this to start to approach an area where more buyers would start to step in, and then see a follow through on that. So right now, the Nasdaq actually, which we know is sold off the most, the Nasdaq is now looking potentially good to take a run at trying to climb and recover from that. The FTSE as well, also again, similar type of wicks shadows off here on the weekly. It's in a really good area here between the moving averages, the sort of really good equilibrium area where, especially if it produces a bit of an indecision candle, this could be a great turning point into August. So just looking to see if that is the way in which the market is heading, I beg your pardon, not ending. We've got a little bit of a double bottom here. If we look at the DAX, breaking above these highs would be sort of a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders or double bottom, depending on which way you want to call it. You've got a nice weekly bullish candle, a bit of an inside bullish candle at this point in time. All of that really adds to the case that it would be not unreasonable for the market to attempt to head higher and try to do that. So interesting. So last week I did expect this week to see the market attempt to push higher. I also said that my expectations lately seem to be a week or 2 or 3 ahead of where the market, or that the market doesn't do as much as I expect it to do in the given week. And so it seems that last week was no different, and the markets did try but just didn't do very much. They just sort of finished a little bit higher, and I'm expecting them meanwhile to do some big moves, and they're not really not prone to putting a lot of effort in my point. Come on, I'm disappointed in you, market. So we've got a lot of wicks here desperately trying to stay above this level here. And of course, what is good about this is we closed previously the previous week lower, which is a little bit more concerning because we might ultimately break through, but we didn't. In fact, this last week we then closed higher. Let's finish off with that ASIC out of Australia. Big move down. We've so far got a bit of a little bit of a bullish inside. Let's call it spinning top. A little bit of a stronger wick on top, and we're sitting on that 50-period moving average. Overall, it is in a nice strong weekly downtrend. It's not looking as bullish. Okay, so if the markets do push higher this week, I'm not expecting this to do as big a push. It's actually looking quite weak in comparison. So overall, though, let's just go back to it and have a look at it on a bigger sense of this. It's not unusual for it to come back to that 50-period moving average and recover from that. So it's also, again, is not outside of the. It's not, outside of it's not a crazy idea that the market could push up from here. Okay, so let's go through the equities of interest. We're at Glencore. Glencore's had a very nice, healthy correction. It's in a really good place to find some support where it is now and possibly move a little bit higher. But if I do have a look at previous highs, especially if we go back here to 2012, wouldn't be that bad for it to come back a little bit further down towards 370 before managing to find a bit of a base. Okay, so, and moving on to Tesco. Right, again here, a strong sort of wick the previous week, a nice little bullish monthly candle. Sorry, that's the previous month. Bullish candle where we are now. The market is trying to push a little bit higher. It's sitting on the mix of all these shorter term and medium term moving averages, trying to get above those. And we've got these sort of slightly equal lows here, finding some support. So that daily looking relatively good to push a little bit higher. So we'll see if that's going to be the case. Not super bullish. Let's have a look at Amex, for example. Amex to me does look really good. We did get that double bottom. That's very nice. We've got bullish divergence here, and we close near the highs. So the daily in isolation looks good. It hasn't got that far to go before we can start to break that bearish momentum. Remember, the trend line for me is just a momentum indicator. If you're on one side of it, it's bearish. If you're on the other side of it, it's more bullish than anything else. That weekly being a nice little rejection of those lows. So a nice little bit of a sort of a double wick there with a bullish candle in the middle. It's at a good area for it to find some support. So that's what I'm going to be looking for this week. The question is, I would say, I'd like to see it head up towards this level here. And it may not be able to travel up that high. But I would consider it a win if it closes and finishes at the end of the coming week above that level. Okay, so what do we have? A nice, strong, bullish uptrend on Apple. Here we go on the daily. We're now heading above the 50 moving average in principle. We've got a nice bullish series of weekly candles. We've got a beautiful monthly candle, which is currently is an inside bullish candle closing near the highs. If we do close near this level or near the highs of the candle or above that level, that is a very, very strong finish. And for me, I've got to quickly see if I can get myself some of that, get back in on Apple. So that looks pretty good. I'm very happy to see that. ARC Innovation as well. There's a bit of a flat level here. Let's call this level 46.35. I'd like to see if we can break up above the high of that one. Currently, these are just small bullish candles at the moment. And at some point in the future, of course, I expect this to do, if nothing else, a retracement back up towards these highs, possibly as high as 70.20. Then we will see whether it's just a correction as part of its future downtrend, if it's going to keep doing that, or if it's actually getting back up and it's starting to get back up on its feet. AT&T again is also back in this. It's still in this area, just can't seem to escape it. We'll see, but it's also not looking that weak. It seems to want to already come back up and test that 21 level. So interesting there. Berkshire Hathaway principally staying above this level. That's good. It's looking to try and find some support. The last 4 weeks hasn't gone anywhere really, but it has a nice level here that would be significant. If we can break 280, 280, we would see this start to head higher. All of that just being interesting. It's a sideways consolidation and consolidation periods. This would be great. Could be very good as a nice consolidation breakout. That can be a nice, something really nice to see if we can get out. Now I just see here that I have highlighted this area on the weekly. So if that is therefore potentially an area where we would encounter resistance, but if we can get back up above it, we become more and more bullish. BP. Okay, so we've seen some of those commodities starting to head lower, and we can see obviously we'll sit with both BP and Exxon. Exxon doing slightly better than BP, but we can see them starting to test those lows. They will take fire from those falling commodities, and so they're trying to stay where they are. You can see here as well. Nothing wrong with Exxon, I think, coming back down to test these previous highs. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's done very well. At the very least, it should come back here and test these highs up here, which means that it could then potentially have further to fall, dropping down towards 80. So it's interesting. If that is the case, that actually implies, sort of using that reverse mechanics, it implies that that the other commodities could potentially still have further to fall. Coca-Cola just managing to kind of tread water and stay where it is. It is still trying to do that. It's not looking particularly bullish or particularly bearish here. It's just as though it's treading water. Okay, so this makes it a little bit harder to predict. If we break these lows, I expect this to come back down towards these other lows here below 60. On the other hand, if it can push its way back up and break these highs, then I expect it to come back up towards these old highs here. So it's stuck in sort of no man's land, not giving a clear indication of its trend, not looking inherently weak, not looking inherently bearish, just not looking super bullish. We've got here FedEx still stuck. I mean, we're still stuck as an inside candle spinning top here inside the last month's candle, which was a very large range. We are currently trying to produce a bit of a higher low there. The daily in a downtrend. There's no trend on the weekly. There's no trend on the monthly. And so, well, if I follow these highs, we're still in a downtrend on the monthly, but we're clearly going sideways. We've been range bound, going all the way back to February. So here, that's nice and bullish on the 4 hour. I want to see if we can push back up and go up towards 230. We will see if that's going to be the case. So some of these are showing those signs. And you know what makes the most sense to me is to see the strongest stocks would start to recover sooner when you think about it, and the weakest ones would take longer. So there'll be a lag between the strongest and the weakest. Yeah, for example, look here at General Motors here. This looks very bullish. We've got, putting the brakes on, tapping support. We're starting to get a bit of bullish divergence here in this area. That's a double bottom. We're starting to come up and break these highs. So on that 4 hourly, I'm looking to see this break above 33.16 and start to push a little bit higher. But it might only mean that it finishes at 35.50 instead of at 40. But it could produce a nice monthly candle. So again, that's showing a lot more bullishness. JP Morgan, strong finish on at the end of last week. We've definite bullish divergence starting to creep up a little bit, that weekly rejecting that major level there. This could result in a nice little bullish candle, and we've got that bullish divergence. So, but in order to be happier about the setup, or to increase my confidence in where it's going to go in the coming months, I need to see it to start to break above these highs here as well, to really finish on that. We're not there yet, but small gains for me make a lot more sense now. Meta. Okay, so Meta is an interesting one. What I want to do, and I very rarely do this, but I'm going to mark this with a general trend line. So if this is ultimately going to be a bear flag, meaning that we can see a temporary trend upwards, and it ultimately breaks through that, then I would expect it to continue to the downside. Alternatively, one of the levels that I would keep an eye on is this level here, which could lead to a breakout. So we're just going to have to see which one it might end up being. We could see a breakout to the upside here, or we could potentially see a breakout to the downside here. Usually I don't talk like that. You won't hear me describe charts in such a fashion. I'm just not really entirely sure how Meta delivers value to, certainly not to users such as you and myself. I know the marketplace is pretty powerful, but I want to see what happens with this. So this could, if we don't break above these highs and we don't produce, this isn't confirmed as a level of resistance, I wouldn't be surprised if we ultimately broke out to the downside. But if we continue to look more and more bullish closing, I'm near the highs here, I expect to break out, okay, to the upside as well. Let's go to Morgan Stanley. There you go. Nice bullish finish and a push higher, breaking these highs. That's a double bottom, bullish divergence. All of that indicates further intent to push a little bit higher. That's a weekly bullish engulfing candle. All of that implies usually, or in isolation, that's a standard I want to hit higher. So my expectation here is not unreasonable that it's going to attempt to go and test a little bit further this week. Netflix as well, nice consolidation. These could be really interesting. For me, I think consolidation breakouts within a longer term uptrend are phenomenally good reward to risk trade setup. So I quite like the look of this. We've got these small candles. Small candles tend to precede big moves. There could be a merger on the horizon. Who knows? We will have to see. But that looks really good. I'm very curious to see what happens here. I want to see us break, let's call it 207, to start to expect it to head back up towards 250. And currently it is range bound, but it is producing a series of higher lows here, and therefore it's just a little bit more bullish than bearish. Can we do that this coming week? Or not? If we fail to do that, then obviously the market is not. I'm keeping in mind that this could be depending on the worst case scenarios that you are hearing, the sky is falling kind of scenarios here, the market could have a attempt to recovery, and then we could have a bigger move done. We're just going to have to play it as it lies, I'm afraid. But so far the markets are looking, a lot of them are showing fantastic bullish signs. Nice little bullish inside candle there on the weekly. We've got monthly also looking nice off a major level. We've got the higher low here on the daily. We almost need to break that. We go into an uptrend on the daily. Once we sort of close above the 50, that momentum again starts shifting and becoming more and more bullish. And these, where we are, these areas I've highlighted are good. They should be due for a beautiful correction and a nice place to see it. That's a nice place to see a turnaround that actually makes sense technically. PayPal as well, producing a nice solid double bottom. I need you to now break above these highs, please, to bring back those buyers and to start picking up pace. But look at these big candles starting to get very, very small, which usually implies not much activity. If the volumes start to increase on this as well, then we're going to start that nice accumulation phase and start to see it climb, push a little bit higher. So we've got to the spider series. This also nice uptrend on that daily. Look at this, very nice, a double bottom, bullish divergence, break above this high, a break and a retest. Ridiculous. I didn't trade that, and that is such an obvious move in hindsight. Obviously, hindsight trading is not respectable, but it also trains you to see where, if you see a pattern like this happening or setting up anywhere, it's a good one. That was just great. There were clues there. That weekly as well, producing that bullish divergence. We've got bullish divergence heading up here as well. Nice little flat double bottom there. We're looking good. At the very least, if we are going to continue down at some point, it's not unreasonable for us to head up towards 92, maybe even 100 to test it from the underside as well. Spotify, ladies and gents, also starting to close near the high. So last week we saw some good closes near the highs. None of this is really a surprise given that we saw a bit of dollar weakness. We've seen the euro dollar cable. Some of those majors are going, look, we want to push back a little bit. We'd like to see a bit of dollar weakness, and gold might even benefit from that possibly. We're seeing oil come down a little bit. It's very interesting to me, but we're seeing at least a change from what we've been seeing the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's been one thing, dollar weakness. So interesting now to see what's going to happen. That's why we may live in interesting times is not necessarily a good thing or not necessarily a peaceful thing. Tesla. Okay, there we go. So let's just mark this level here. We could possibly see ourselves setting up for a bullish breakout to the upside there. Not guaranteed, but something worthwhile watching. That weekly chart is a mess, guys. This is a sideways market. It's range bound. It's not super attractive. I don't expect it to pick up pace until it gets back up above 800. Then I would expect it. But it's also, again, that blue area marked. It's a good area for Tesla to find its feet. Okay, Vanguard, bullish divergence on the daily. Now we've got a bit of a double bottom here pushing higher. Same. I don't think I'm that crazy to expect this to push and finish higher this coming week. We did kind of this week, just not very much, but possibly there just isn't very much enthusiasm, and therefore the markets are slow to respond, and my expectations are too optimistic. Right. So moving on to bonds. Okay, so we've got the 10-year T-note. Again, we've had a strong rejection last week, and therefore I was looking to see if we broke the low. We did not break the low of the previous week. Interesting to me. Strong rejection here. So again, we don't really have an answer here. We need to see you break above the high to start to head up or possibly come down. We could even do an inverted head and shoulders. We could see the beginning of that, or we could just see it breaking above those highs. But that's interesting because it is, if nothing else, it's just not heavily selling off. Same thing again here. Eurobond has been pushing back up to the upside here. Look at this. That's a relatively aggressive move. That's a swing low on the monthly, which usually in isolation would mean we'd see this coming back up towards these moving averages, which will put it in at about the 160 mark there. So interesting there. So we're seeing a shift on one side as well. Cryptos, guys and girls, let's get on to that. So we did see, and we have seen some of these cryptos finishing a little bit higher as opposed to falling through those lower areas here. They're going sideways on the weekly. Please pay attention to this. This is a clue. If the market is very weak, it won't be able to climb back up. It'll go sideways before potentially continuing to the downside. So we do need to see the market actually push up, break above 25,000, possibly push up towards 30,000. We need to see that, whether it's this week or next week, but that's what we need to see. Otherwise, we're just going to start to get weaker and weaker. Markets eventually not going to get encouraged. They're going to break lower. But again, I stand by my assessment that if equities can start to pick up some enthusiasm, we could start to see the market starting to push a little bit higher, and we would possibly see cryptos push higher as well. If we see everything else climb, including tech stocks as well, and cryptos don't, that is in itself a big red flag. We'll need to revisit that if that is something that happens. Okay, there we go. So look at that. Ethereum managed to break above its level of resistance. A little bit of a consolidation breakout, and there you can see that weekly chart starting to try to correct and head a little bit higher. So interesting. This could be significant. This could be significant because Ethereum has managed to effectively lead the way where Bitcoin hasn't, and that could be very significant. So interesting. Cardano. has pulled back into the moving averages, produced a bearish candle here. We could see this take another move lower. If we break the low of this, we could see the market come back down to this level here and then potentially further. It's not looking super strong at this point, as I said, but it will certainly get a boost if everything else does. But this is now, I would say, still leaning bearish rather than even neutral. Binance starting to climb as well. Again, I want to mark this as a potential bear flag, meaning that should we, oops, that didn't go right. Should we see this just as a temporary retracement before it ultimately breaks down? Currently, it looks bullish. Currently, it does look like it wants to head up a little bit. My question is, if it comes down, we start to, especially when we break these lows, we're going to then continue down there. Overall, I want to see this continue to head high, and I do think that if we see the others do it, it will do it as well. I'm just going to draw that little bit of a line in the sand and see what happens there. And finishing off with Solana, we're still a small bullish inside candle on that monthly chart. Again, we need to see a significant move up into these old lows over here. Okay, we've got to see a move back up into that to see something that's worthwhile, giving a clear signal. Okay, possibly we're going to see a shift in it. Overall, though, you can see that downtrend is starting to now potentially shift into a bit of an uptrend. I want to see it continued. We need to maintain that bullishness. And again, just wrapping up, if we could get a bit of a reprieve from the stronger dollar for a few weeks, maybe for a month or something, we could see the market starting to shift a little bit, and that could actually impact the way that equities are. And at this point, I think we could see a split between some of those commodities. They're still bearish, but some of the equities are possibly still looking nice and bullish, and we could see some of the stronger ones start to recover. The question is then, will we see cryptos follow through on that? But I do find it interesting that Ethereum has led the way. It's broken up higher significantly where Bitcoin hasn't, but that also adds validity to the idea that Bitcoin could break higher as well. And if it doesn't, be interesting to see if next week we're back down, then we're still still battling that. But there's a lot of signs here that see that the market has certainly from last week to this week the game isn't necessarily over, and it wants to see if it can push further. So there we go, ladies and gents. Please enjoy your coming week. Finish off the rest of your weekend. Have a good time. Trade safely and carefully and responsibly. And I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Any questions or comments, please don't be shy. Please ask and put those into the questions below, into the section below. Thank you, ladies and gents. Have a good week.